When I came off the medicines finally in 2023, I had to go back through my records because I had no idea how many I had been put on. And
Wow.
it was 47 different meds over that,
47.
over that time
47.
period. Hmm.
Hi, everyone. I am glad that you are here today. I am especially glad for it because I have my friend Elissa joining us on this call, and she is going to share from her life experience, her own healing story with us. So, Elissa is my healing buddy. I have already learned so much from her, and I'm just excited to dive into her story with you all today. And exciting news, which we will touch on more later in this video, is that she is going to be coaching. And you guys are going to want to get in on this because she has so much good things to share. She has come through a lot. So stay tuned. All right. So diving into to Elissa's story, I would love to hear, Elissa, when did mental health diagnosis first come into your life?
That would be 1996. So,
Mhm.
very long time ago, however many years ago that is.
Mhm.
Do you want me to go into a little background of?
Yeah, let's hear some of your background story of like how what mental health was like for you, and then what led to that diagnosis and that experience.
Well, so I was newly married in 1996, and I had moved to a different state where I knew no one. And my husband moved to Florida for a job from Tennessee.
Mhm.
And so I was extremely anxious about that, and I started having panic attacks.
Mhm.
And, didn't have a whole lot of support, not any really community.
Mhm.
And the panic attacks just kept going on and on. And so who do you go to? You go to a doctor. And
Mhm.
really just a walk-in clinic is where I went
Wow.
at that point in time and got put on Paxil and Xanax. And so that was
Wow.
my introduction into psychiatry, or the mental
Mhm.
health
Yeah.
medicalization.
And so you
And
had a time of just being vulnerable, going through a
mhm,
hard life adjustment,
yeah,
marriage, changing where you lived, changing your
yeah.
whole scenery, everything, and then start having symptoms. And then what did they say to you as far as how did they explain medication to you at that point as a
There
solution?
wasn't a whole lot of explanation. It was just a
Okay.
walk-in clinic, and
Thank you.
I think I might have been referred to a psychiatrist at that point. I'm not really sure. I
Mhm.
can't even remember that far back, but not a whole lot of explanation. It was just a diagnosis of panic disorder given out at that time. And I thought, oh, this is what I have. This is what's wrong with me.
Oh.
And that's what got me introduced into this system.
Mm.
And so I did go to counseling at that time and went to anxiety support groups at that time. I feel like that helped more than the medication. And so
Yeah.
I did get some counseling and stuff at that time, that's really where this desire to get into social work started, was back at
Certainly.
in that way back then.
Way back
So
then and
my
that
support
experience.
groups, my counseling, and all that just really kind of spurred me on to get into this field way back then. And
Mhm.
then, I started getting a little bit better, from the counseling and everything. And then years went by down the line where I was kind of shifted from Paxil to a couple of different medications at that time. But I went through infertility, and
Mhm.
when I finally got pregnant, I think I was on Wellbutrin at the time I was pregnant. So I had been shifted a couple of medications during that time period. And some depression was coming on during infertility stuff going on that was also kind of situational,
Mhm.
with trying to get pregnant, having surgeries, endometriosis, all kinds of stuff. And then
Mhm.
so this is kind of where Joanna and my story kind of meld a little bit. After I had my son, I finally got pregnant and had my son. and had a very, I think Joanna and I might have talked about this, but I had a traumatic pregnancy. I went through a lot of preterm labor.
No.
And so at the end of my pregnancy, I went through a lot of preterm labor, but I had, a normal, birth and delivery. And then it wasn't until my son was several months old, probably 4 or 5 months old, and I just started getting really depressed. This is very typical postpartum depression time for a lot of women. And that's, I was still taking this Wellbutrin, started having insomnia problems from postpartum, and, not sleeping. The baby was sleeping fine. I was not. So just a nosedive with the postpartum. And, I started getting some psychosis from the insomnia with postpartum. And, my husband was trying to be really helpful and take care of our son. And he was just like, well, we may need a psychiatrist, because this wasn't, the postpartum was not getting any better. It was just seems to be getting worse. And that was my first real psychiatry kind of re-diagnosis of what was going on with me at that time. That would have been 2002 when my son was born. And the psychiatrist at that time was, he acknowledged the postpartum, but from my symptoms and from him going by the DSM, I got diagnosed with bipolar 1. At that time, he thought that the insomnia was from mania. And so that, and he did have the conversation with me at that time that I would have to take medications for the rest of my life.
Wow.
So
here
that was
in
a
a postpartum.
reintroduction. Yeah.
So in a postpartum, which is a physical experience that a woman's body goes through, you were told, hey, you have this disorder.
Yeah.
This other disorder that's lifelong and means you need to be on lifelong medication.
Right. So my second diagnosis was bipolar 1 and was immediately put on Seroquel, which is an antipsychotic for sleep and for bipolar. And then at that time was probably introduced to, SSRIs or some other antidepressant along with the Seroquel. So,
yeah. So, and did they take you off of what you were on before and then put those new ones on, or were you on all of them at once? Okay.
Yeah, I was still on the Wellbutrin, and I think maybe at that time they had tried a benzodiazepine for sleep, which wasn't really working. But, I think that the doctor did acknowledge that I had postpartum, but for some reason it was above and beyond. And one of the questions he asked me, and this is really important, one of the questions that he asked me was if I had any family history of mental illness. And the only history that I have is that my dad had been on medication for depression. And so my dad had been on medication at that point for several years. And so when I mentioned that to him,
that's when he decided that was the flag.
That was, we got a, this depression thing. It's probably not postpartum. I don't know what he was thinking.
Yeah.
But that's when my lifelong medication journey really started, was with postpartum.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would you say, like, to somebody now, or what do you wish was said that instead of this kind of diagnosis, do you think would be more helpful?
Acknowledge, first of all, I'm not totally against psychiatry. I'm just not. I just wish that there was more community with my postpartum, that maybe people would have recognized that instead of slapping me with a bipolar 1 diagnosis. That's what got me introduced into psychiatry, was that diagnosis, really.
Yeah.
I wish that I would have had more
the finalizing. Of saying, oh, this is a lifelong thing. It's just now finally revealed now that you've had a baby. Yeah.
Right, this is
Yeah.
what brought it out. This postpartum is
Right.
what brought out your bipolar kind of thing, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Which actually is very odd considering you had already lived an adult life up until that point without having that, you know?
Yeah,
The only thing that changed was having a baby.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I wish that I would not have gone to a psychiatrist, but, that's just kinda what you did,
Yep.
and, I was having trouble coping, and, them asking my family history, I think that really did it. I think that really did it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
that makes sense. So tell me what happened. Tell me some of what happened during those years when you were medicated. So you were medicated, but you had your son. What was your functioning like during that time? Some of the good and the bad.
This started many decades of being
Mhm.
medicated. Because once you get the bipolar 1 diagnosis, and someone in a white coat tells you that you're going to be on medication the rest of your life, you think, okay, I'm just going to be on this one medication the rest of my life. Well, that's not the way it happened. I was on a couple of different medicines at that time, like I said, Seroquel being the main one, and then an antidepressant. And then, my story is kind of similar to yours, Joanna. It was be functioning for a while, and then after about a year or so, be not functioning. The depression
Withdraw.
would ramp up. Some of the insomnia would tend to break through, come back. And then at that point, I would go back to whatever doctor, psychiatrist I was going to at that time, and they would switch meds. So I
Okay.
went on that treadmill for a
Yeah.
very, very long time. And the medicines that I was on would either, after about a year, they would either stop working and they would increase the med, or they would stop working and they would take me off of those, put me on something else. They usually kept me on the Seroquel though because of the bipolar. So
No.
um, I did this rigmarole for a very,
You
very
did
long time.
a you did a lot of the rigmarole. Do you want to show
Mhm.
your list of your
Yeah,
so
this is
Alyssa showed
the
me.
amount of medicines I was on front, back. Um,
Wow.
I had to go through when I came off the medicines finally in 2023. I had to go back through my records because I had no idea how many I had been put on. And
Wow.
it was 47 different meds over that,
47.
yeah, over that time
47.
period. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
all of you listening who are in your own healing journeys and suffering, and if you're looping about how many meds you've been on, I want you to remember that paper. And remember Elissa, she has gone through 47 and she has experienced healing. So I just want you
Yes.
to hold that in your mind when you're feeling completely afraid that because of your medication history you're not going to be able to heal. Well, here you go. This is your example. Elissa has experienced healing. That is just incredible.
Yeah, and
So,
that's also, but a lot of people in this community have probably heard about the polydrugging. This is
yeah.
very common.
Mhm.
You will be stable for a while on the meds. They either will stop working or side effects would get so much to where they would take me off, put me on different ones, see if those would work.
Mhm.
Either they wouldn't work or they would work for a while and then they would stop. They would increase the dose. So over the 28 years that I was on the meds, I was hospitalized 5 times.
Hmm.
And usually the hospitalizations just involved them taking me off whatever meds I was on cold turkey to put me on more meds to see if those would work. So
Wow.
I've experienced withdrawal many times over the years.
Mhm.
I didn't know what withdrawal was. It was
Right.
just
It was
always told,
masked.
yeah, it was just always told to me that, well, we have to cut you off these cold turkey, put you in the hospital, put you on something new, but anything that you're experiencing is probably bipolar. So withdrawal was never acknowledged. So,
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it was kind of like it was covered up with the diagnosis. Like, oh,
mhm.
this is the diagnosis. That's what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Yeah, so I have been in withdrawal many times. I've been on every class of medication except for the MAOI. That's the only class that
Mhm.
I haven't really been on, but they've tried something in every class of med with
Wow.
me. And then, so I don't know exactly what year, but it was later on in this journey, probably, I'm going to guess around 2012 or so. It was just
Mhm.
finally, I was just finally changed diagnosis from bipolar to treatment resistant depression. I had
Wow.
been hospitalized so many times and had gotten so many different meds. And I don't know at what point they change your diagnosis to treatment resistant depression, but I had been on multiple different meds and I did ECT. They finally did ECT with me probably after they changed my diagnosis to treatment resistant depression. They tried
Mhm.
ECT on me because that's kind of an out of the box kind of thing for treatment resistant depression.
Right.
And I did 12 treatments in 2011 and then did 12 treatments in 2014.
Wow.
So did those two separate times. And
Mhm.
I feel like 2011, I felt like I was stabilized, on that. But
Yeah.
when more medications added, it's probably
Yeah.
on a maximum of 6 medications at one time, but I was typically on about 3 or 4 at a time.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. So you have experienced polydrugging and you know what that is
yeah,
like to cycle through many different meds, to go through many med changes, and for to be told that it's just your mental illness. What
yeah.
was kind of the turning point for you, Elissa, when you decided to try something different? Like what led
Well,
you down that path?
so what led to that path was, the treatment resistant depression. My regular medical doctor, my GP, had recommended me do ketamine infusions. And so
Mhm.
ketamine came on the market as this off-label treatment for depression that was supposed to change your glutamate levels in your brain.
Yeah.
So I had done ketamine infusions, and I can't remember what year that was. I think that was 2018. Had done
Mhm.
several ketamine infusion treatments in the hospital, and then had done more ketamine infusion treatments in 2020. And those seem to help somewhat, but you just go into a clinic, you get hooked up with an IV, you get the ketamine. There's no therapy with it. There, you just leave the clinic, and it's just a
Mhm.
regular medical doctor who gives you that.
Mhm.
So, and also had TMS. So
Okay.
transcranial magnetic stimulation. I had two different treatments of those, 2 separate years.
So
That's
you
also
tried
true.
everything.
Yeah, I tried everything out of the box, in the box, beside the
Mhm.
box.
Uh-huh.
So I mentioned the ketamine because that was the last thing that I did. So at the end of 2022, I decided, either the meds weren't working or I was too sick from the meds. So I decided to do more ketamine infusions at the end of 2022. And
Okay.
this was a different clinic that I went to for ketamine infusions. And I think you do 3 of those a week for usually a month. So I
Mhm.
told my husband at the beginning of those treatments, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do if this doesn't work because I was just kind of at the end of my rope after 20 something years
Yeah.
of this
Yeah.
rigmarole. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do if this ketamine infusion doesn't help. And so at that
Yeah.
point, I wasn't really decided on what I was going to do. But at the end of 2022, I had those ketamine infusion, that section of them, and it did not help. It did not help
Wow.
at all. And at that point, I sat down with my husband and I told him, I said, the only thing I haven't tried is no meds. That's the only
Right.
thing I haven't tried. And I haven't tried going to a nutritionist. I haven't really tried that route yet. And I thought, well, if I get my diet in order and I get on supplements and try to come off these meds, that's the only thing I haven't tried. So I'm going to do that at the beginning of 2023. Um, no matter what that looked like, I was determined to do it. So that's
'Cause you
what kind of knocked all this off at the end of 22.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like you had turned over every rock they had for
Yep.
you to see if you could just be okay,
Yep.
and not have this terrible, just hovering depression pressing you down. And you turned over every single rock, and then finally, that sounds like it was just like your turning point. You're like, the solution can't be here if I've tried every single thing they have.
I just felt deep inside, Joanna, that I mean, I couldn't really voice it, but I felt deep inside
Yeah.
that the medications were making me sick. I just
Mhm.
really I don't know if I could really even voice that at the time, but now that I look back on it, that was part of my decision process. Like, these medicines have to be making me sick
Yeah.
because I felt so terrible off and on.
That
I mean, I would
whole
feel stable for a while and then not, and feel stable and feel not. And it just, I just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I'm like, I've got to get these things out of my system. That's the
Yeah.
only way forward. And I prayed about this a lot over the years. I think I prayed many, many times that God would just take my bipolar away from me. And then many,
Mm.
many times that God would just take my treatment resistant depression from me, that I wouldn't have to take all these out of the box treatments anymore, that there's got to be a better quality of life than what I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
Um, and, his answer was wait. His answer was wait.
Mm.
And so I
Mm.
did have to wait for many, many years before that prayer was answered. And of course, he didn't answer it in the way that I thought he was going to answer it. He answered it in a better way. So,
Mm. And now what do you think of those diagnoses now?
I think that I never had bipolar. I think that I never had panic disorder. I mean, I did think that I had a problem with anxiety in 96, but
Mhm.
it could have been dealt with in a different way. And
Mhm.
I was never bipolar. Um,
Mhm.
Treatment resistant depression is only something you give to somebody who they don't know what to do with you. that's that's
Yeah.
what I
Like,
believe now.
yeah.
Um, I believe that I had really bad postpartum depression. That's what was going
Mhm.
on with me at that time.
Which is temporary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's what I feel now. I feel that I am not mentally ill. I never was mentally ill. Um, I just got caught up in a system where somebody was telling me that was what was going on, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So,
Yes. Yes. And then now it sounds like you really do have freedom from those labels.
yes,
Wow.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So, all of you listening, I want you to hear that. She feels freedom from those labels. So, if there are labels that feel like they're hovering over you, like you are never going to heal and you have this label, I want you to take hope in this because you really can come to the other side of the label. You really
Yes.
can. I'd love to hear more about the tapering part of that journey, and then even to dive into some of the withdrawal part of what that was like. Um, so, and you can just share, exactly how it went for you, the good, bad, and the ugly of that process. When you finally made that decision to taper, how did you go about it?
Well, so when I decided, after the last ketamine treatment at the end of 2022, I decided to try to find, what I was trying to find was a natural path in my
Mm-hmm.
area. It's hard to find in my area. I was trying to
Mm-hmm.
find a functional medicine doctor here that was going to help me in some way.
Uh-huh.
But I went online and I found a holistic practitioner that is in Huntsville, Alabama, which is about 30 minutes from where I live. And I thought, you know what? I've got to go this route. I've got to get away from doctors. I mean, I was just desperate trying to find somebody who would give me nutritional support that was going to help me
Mm-hmm.
because I knew a little bit about withdrawal. I just didn't know how I could find support.
Mm-hmm.
My psychiatrist when I spoke with him about trying to come off the meds, he was not really on board with that. He was agreeing to taper me to put me on an MAOI. That was the only class of drugs I had not been on, and you can't be on any other real, psych meds to be on that. That's a very
Mm.
specific class of drugs. So my idea was he's agreed to taper me, so I'm going to agree to taper myself, get tapered and get away from these meds. That was my idea.
Yeah.
So he did write me enough prescriptions to taper. At that time, I didn't know about hyperbolic.
Mhm.
I was just getting new into this. So when I
So
went
this
to
is
my
just
holistic, what?
I was just gonna say, this is just you just knowing. You just
Yeah.
had this knowing. You just had to get yourself tapered. And so you just found a way locally that you could get
Yeah.
yourself off without
Yeah.
knowing. Yeah.
No, I mean, I was just free falling.
Yeah.
When I first met with a holistic practitioner, she had never really helped anybody taper.
Oh.
She was kind of an Eastern medicine type of holistic practitioner. So she did do like
Mhm.
auricular therapy, which is acupuncture.
Mhm.
She did a lot of, way out of the box for Western medicine treatments on me. But
Okay.
her first thing was trying to educate me what the microbiome is, what gut health is, what nutritional eating looks like, what candida overgrowth looks like in your body.
Yeah.
So she was trying to give me education, but I was determined. I mean, I had no doubt in my mind that I was going to taper off these meds. I just didn't
Mhm.
know what that was going to look like. So
Mhm.
she was trying to help me. She set me up with a supplement company. And this
Mhm.
supplement company, they have a psychiatrist that works on board with them, and they help you through a customer support line to taper meds. And so
Okay.
their idea was to taper me in a linear way.
Mhm.
And I had already been sort of trying to taper myself in a way. I was trying to work with my psychiatrist because he kept going down on the meds. And at that time, I was on Wellbutrin, gabapentin, and Seroquel, and so he was working with me to taper me. But since I was switching over to her, she kind of referred me to the supplement company that was going to kind of take over for him whenever he
Hmm.
wrote me enough prescriptions out for me to taper. So,
Okay.
because I was trying to get away from psychiatry, you have to understand, I was trying to get away from
Yeah.
psychiatry and I was trying to get away from him. So,
Mhm.
I kind of just put myself into her hands and went with this supplement company, and they tapered me all three meds at one time over a year. And so, from February 23 to February 24 was when I tapered all three at one time. Um,
Wow.
I think she was the holistic practitioner. She was kind of wanting me to go a little bit slower, but I didn't know about hyperbolic. I didn't know about slow tapering. I wanted those poisons out of my body. And
Mhm.
so that's the wrong way to look at it.
But you
So
didn't know.
no, I didn't know. I didn't know the slower you go, the safer it is. I thought, well, a year is a really long time to taper. I can't believe I have to wait a whole year to taper. I was thinking that at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
someone who's been on these meds for 28 years, there's no way you should really taper in a year, and especially do it in a
Mhm.
linear way.
Mm.
But she was doing the best she could. I don't fault her. I was like a guinea pig for one of her clients trying to do
Yeah.
this.
Mhm.
And we just did the best we could with all of that. She was trying to give me support. I was seeing her either every week or every other week. I would go in to visit her. She
Mm.
was my coach during
Well,
this. She was a counselor, and she would talk to me about how I was feeling, all my symptoms, and everything like that. So she was literally my coach during this. And so I owe her a
mm.
lot.
Mm.
But symptoms were rough. Symptoms were rough during tapering. I had a lot
Mm.
of multiple symptoms during that. I should have printed out a list of my symptoms, but the symptoms were debilitating, but didn't get really bad until the medications were completely out of my system after about a year. That's
Okay.
when the symptoms really ramped up. So I was having symptoms during tapering for sure, but they just started ramping up after everything was out of my body. So
Mm. Now, during tapering, when you had started your taper, were you at a time where you were functioning but just not feeling well? Or were you already like, I'm not functioning, I need to get well before I
well, I
work or
was
before I.
yeah, so I started tapering in February, or when I was really like January of 23, but I was still
Mhm.
working. Um,
Okay.
I was
So
a
you were
social worker
working
with
and tapering.
Yeah, I was a social worker with hospice, and I was still working and tapering at the same time. And then a lot of things happened in my family during that time. My dad was not doing well. My sister had been diagnosed with cancer at that time that summer. And so I was tapering and kind of getting worse and worse and worse with the symptoms
Mhm.
as I kept going down and down. And then everything kind of came to a head in June of 2023. And I was having a lot of trouble working. I was just really, it just kept getting more intense with the symptoms. And then with
Yeah,
my family
yeah.
situation, I just talked to my husband. I said, you know what? I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. I'm trying to keep up with this job, and I'm trying to take care of my family who don't even live in the same state as me. I was having to drive a lot. So I just said,
Yeah.
I've got to temporarily stop this until the withdrawal can get better. And
Yeah.
so I stopped. I quit my job in June of 23, and I was still going to a holistic clinic, like a lot at
Mhm.
that time. So the symptoms, just as I got further down, they just started ramping up and up and up. And
Oh,
at the
yeah.
end of my taper, I came off of, I think it was, I should have wrote it down, but I think it was like 12.5 of gabapentin, 12.5 of Wellbutrin, and then like 6.25 or something like that of Seroquel, and then it went from that to zero. So
Wow. So a
once
big leap.
yeah, that section should have been done the slowest, but that section was done the fastest on that linear taper.
Wow.
And so at that from all three at the same time that I was coming off of. And so yeah,
Wow.
within I don't know, a few days after that big jump at the end, that's when the symptoms all just started ramping up. I had physical, cognitive, mental, emotional, all kinds of stuff was going on at that
Wow.
time. So, yeah.
Wow. And so when that happens, you basically had a crash. You were kind of
Mhm,
going down, and then you had
mhm.
a like a total crash coming off the end there
Yes.
of
Yeah.
yours.
Mhm.
And your symptoms just went way up. How did you make sense of that then? Like what was going through your mind, or what were you starting to think at that point?
Well, I mean, I I don't remember when it was that I learned about hyperbolic. I think that I learned about hyperbolic not too long after I had gotten completely off the meds.
Yeah.
And so when I started learning about hyperbolic and what that was and how you should do a slow taper and very gradual and one medication at a time and never come off too fast at the end, I learned about all of that and I was like, great. So then I realized why I was feeling so much worse
Mm.
after the taper. I think I kind of put those two together and was like, here we go.
Yeah.
I'm either gonna go back on the med or I'm just gonna go forward no matter what it takes. And I decided to just go forward no matter what it took.
Right.
And at that time, the only support that I had, I had
Mm.
no support from anybody in this community just because I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had my coach, I had the lady that was helping me, with the nutritional support. I had her, that was it. And I had
That
my
was it.
husband, that was it.
Wow.
And I started learning
Wow.
about hyperbolic. I learned what I shoulda, coulda, woulda done, and
Uh-huh.
just decided to keep going forward no matter what it took. And it was horrific. It was like a nightmare.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that's how a lot of people who have experienced acute describe it as like living through a nightmare and it just isn't stopping.
Yes.
So what did you do to get through some of that nightmare point of your story?
Well, I just, I
What
think,
do you think held you?
well, like I said, the holistic practitioner I was getting help from, I started learning about, I think after I had been completely off the meds for a
Mhm.
few months, I started learning about Angie Peacock. I started
Okay.
kind of doing the deep dive into the hyperbolic, and then I
Mhm.
started learning about Angie Peacock more that summer of
Mhm.
2024. And when I started watching Angie's videos, I was like, this is a thing. This is a thing. I mean, I
Yeah.
already knew I was in withdrawal from,
Mhm.
watching a few documentaries, and then I had watched Medicating Normal, and then I
Mhm.
found Angie's videos. And once I
Mhm.
found Angie's videos, I was like, this is a literal thing. I just, there's a
Yes.
community out there. I can't believe this.
Yes.
And then once I started watching Angie's videos that summer, I started going to her support groups. I think it was either July or August of
Mhm.
24.
Yes. That's where we
And
met.
yes, yeah, I think we met like in October or November of that year.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so when I started those support groups and watching her videos, and I just started learning what this community was.
Rough Matter.
And I started getting some idea after I had been to Angie Peacock's groups had been to about 3 or 4 of them, and I
Mhm.
started realizing how I can use my social work degree.
Mm.
That started coming together for me because, Angie kept talking in the group about how she was a social worker, and I'm like, okay, maybe my hospice career is like completely over now. Maybe I can be a coach. So I started talking and wanting to become a coach really early on in this process.
Yes, and I
So,
actually remember that. Yes. And you've been a healing buddy to many people too. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
well, Joanna was my first healing buddy.
Yeah.
And I had a few other healing buddies from Angie's group. I think Joanna and I were the ones that kind of stayed in touch more often. But going to those groups and then meeting a couple of healing buddies, and then I think I met a few more healing buddies later on after Joanna had healed and started her own
Mhm.
coaching business. I was starting already, I was still going to Angie's groups and had met a
Mhm.
few more healing buddies.
Mhm.
And those healing buddies, we started doing I guess you would call it a chat on WhatsApp.
Mhm.
So we started doing a chat on there. Then we decided to start meeting by video.
Uh-huh.
And so then I kind of headed that up, and I was like, well, let's start meeting by video on a regular basis. And so I did that. And so we've been doing this video with the healing buddies for, it's probably been almost a year. Well, not quite a year now. We've
Mhm.
been meeting with that, and I've been kind of heading that up, kind of
Mhm.
getting practice for being a coach. So that's kind of what we've got me more involved with it. And then Angie herself was trying to give me encouragement to be a coach. So,
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So connecting with others was
mhm.
one of your ways of getting through the
Oh,
suffering.
that helps more than anything. Anybody who's listening to
Mhm.
this, just know that healing buddies and being in a group, um, just connecting with people, that co-regulation piece is so important. It will
Mhm.
just literally keep you going.
I
No matter
agree.
what symptoms you're having, it will help keep you going in this.
I agree. And it's so helpful to be able to like recognize I'm not the only one. Because it sounds like for so long with your diagnosis, you had this like, oh, I have this diagnosis.
Mhm.
I need these meds. And then you decide to take that turn into, okay, this is not working for me. I need to find healing elsewhere. And then to finally find that connection with others who are like, yeah, we also needed to find healing elsewhere outside of medication.
Yeah, and you learn so much about this process from people in this community. That's where you learn it. That's where
Mhm.
you learn it.
Yes,
So, but I mean, I
absolutely.
suffered with I still am going through the windows and waves process.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm still at 100% yet, but I'm having the majority windows rather than waves. It just shifted, was having
Yes.
mainly just waves, and then it shifts into mainly windows and waves, and that's just where I'm at right now. So,
That's awesome.
mhm.
That's something to celebrate when it flips.
Ver yes, it's such a relief. And I
Yes.
mean, you know how that is. It's just you're just so
Yeah.
relieved. You don't wanna look back anymore. You just wanna move forward.
You're just ready for
So,
life.
yes.
Yes. Yeah. So, I'd love to dive more into the strategies. So you said connecting with others helped you through it. Were there other things that you did during like the worst of it? Like the sort of terrible, not able to cope, not able to think. Like what kinds of things got you from moment to moment?
Well, so this is a big part of my recovery process. And I think I first learned about this in one of Angie's groups, and she had mentioned that she used this app called I Am. And
No.
she kind of did, I thought it was funny. She kind of described it as these cheesy little positive self compassion, things on, sayings on this app. And I'm like, what do I have to lose? I'm already suffering here. So I downloaded the
Yeah.
app and got on there and was reading some of that stuff. And I'm like, this is really helpful. This is really a good thing to do. And so that introduced me to, I'm going to start putting all these on Post-it notes and just posting them all over the place just so I can look at them. Because in
Mm.
this process, you're so negatively focused. That is
Yeah.
uncontrollable. You cannot do anything about that, but you can choose to put stuff into your brain. That is something you can do. You have the ability to do that. So I just started taking these things on WhatsApp and just writing them out on Post-it notes and just putting them everywhere, like all over my room and all over. I'm like, well, if I am not able to generate a positive thought, I might as well read one. So that really helped. And then that transformed for my healing journey into any kind of self compassion and self love.
Mm.
So I kind of just started making my own notes and putting them all over the
Mhm.
place just so I can read them and put them into my head. Because if you're
Mm.
unable to generate anything on your own, then why not put stuff in there you want to generate?
Right, right. So you kind of have these external ways of reminding yourself of something positive, something hopeful.
Yes. Yeah, so
Mm.
I did that, and it really did help. That shifted a lot for me. I mean, there's a part of this process, you have so many symptoms that you cannot control. But if
No.
you want to change your response to the symptoms, then self-compassion is a big piece of that.
No.
Because you can be negative and self-critical in this process. That is something that you can't necessarily control. And
No.
so what you can control is what you put in on top of that. So I decided to put in lots of self-love and self-compassion on top of that, whether I believed it or not. I was like, well, okay, this can't hurt. So I just decided to keep reading those things over and over again. And then when I got tired of those, I would take those down and put up new ones so that my brain wouldn't be like, oh, I know what that says. I don't want to read that anymore. I would put new ones up and shove those in my brain hundreds of times a
Uh-huh.
day because that's how many
Mhm.
times I was having looping thoughts. So I'm like, well, I'm going to shove this into my brain as many times as I'm looping here. And that
Yes.
really helped me. That really
Yes.
changed my trajectory in this. It did not change my symptoms. You have
Mm.
to accept the symptoms for what they are, but you can change the way you think about the symptoms, and you can change the way you think about yourself. So
No.
I just kept putting up those notes. I still have them on my bathroom mirror. They're
No.
still there for me to look at. all the time. So that
And
changed the course.
that was a changing. Well, and it sounds like it created kind of like a new habit for something that you could do. That was like a new
Yes.
habit for yourself.
Well, it's a, you feel out of control.
Yeah.
And a lot of these symptoms are not within your control. And so you feel a sense of being out of control. And so what you can control is how you consider the symptoms, how you respond to them when they're happening. And then also what you do have is in control is what you put into your brain. And there's not too much else you have within your control in this whole process. So I was trying to grab any kind of control that I had in this process. And those were a couple of things that I was working on. And I'm going to grasp onto them because that's what I have that's going to be able to be controllable.
Yeah, that's what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't control the timeline of withdrawal, which is one of the hardest parts. Yeah.
Right.
That's wonderful tools. And those are like really powerful ways to direct yourself through it. Because basically what you're doing is you're like, well, I'm in it. This is how I can direct myself through it, even though I can't make it stop.
And also, an important thing is to focus on the facts of what's happening instead of the neuroemotions or the emotions that you are dealing with. This is something that's happening to me. This is something that has an ending. That's one thing that, Angie had taught us during this is something that has an end.
That's right.
This is something that is happening to me. This is not something I'm choosing. So the more that I would try to be more neutral about it and focus on the facts of what was going on, that was also helpful. That also did not get rid of my symptoms. But it was just me focusing on what my brain was having to go through and what my central nervous system was having to go through that was not within my control, and that it did have a timeline, like he said.
Yeah, right. Because your brain says in withdrawal, this is never ending. This is the new you. Because your brain is trying to figure out what is happening and create a story around it.
Yes.
And so, yeah. And so that suffering, our brain's looking for solutions, looking for the story, looking for something to blame.
Yeah. Trying to create stories about what could possibly be happening other than withdrawal. I had a lot of those stories, like there's something going on with me that's not withdrawal. And so that is a very common loop. But the more that I even put on notes around my room, the neutral part of it or the fact-based part of it, I know this is what your brain is telling you. These are what your emotions are trying to tell you, but here's the real fact. Here's the real story.
Yeah.
I would put those and also try to focus on those. Healing takes as long as it takes. I'm doing the best I can today, and that's all I can ask of myself. That was a big one for me. I did a lot of resting. I did not like doing a lot of resting. I had no choice but to do resting. I did a lot of not getting out of the house. I did not like that, but I had to do that. I had a lot of exhaustion during this. So I would, once you get the windows and waves pattern, you kind of learn how much you can push yourself and how much you can't.
That's right.
So,
yeah, tell us a little bit about that. How did you know, okay, I pushed myself too hard, I need to do less? Like, how did you start to realize the relationship of that?
Well, the windows and waves process, I had, my first window fairly early. I mean, it was maybe 9 or 10 months off. I had my first window and I got to see my true self on that day.
Wow.
And I didn't have my next window for a while, though. That was kind of a one-off right there. But when I started getting more regular windows, I started really trying, I got my motivation back. The anhedonia got better, so I was getting more motivated to get out. And so I would just try to do everything.
Yes.
I would just once I had a window, I'm like, "Yes, okay, now I can do this, and I haven't done that in a long time, so I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do this. Come on,
Uh-huh.
let's go, we gotta hurry before the next wave."
Yes.
So, that's a trial and error, that's why we talk about in groups about this trial and error process, because when I got my first windows, I was trying to do everything.
Everything. I hear this so
And
much. Yeah.
yes, and so then that would put me into a really bad wave. And
Mhm.
once I did too much, and then I would get this major exhaustion, and all the other symptoms. I've done a
Mhm.
video about all my symptoms. I'm not going to talk about all of them here. There's a lot of them.
We'll
But
put
it
links.
would just ramp everything up once I did
Mhm.
too much in a window on those early windows. So you kind of have to dip your toe in and see what you can do and what doesn't make the wave go up the next day. So that is a trial and error. That's individual for
Mhm.
everybody.
Yep.
So,
And so did you just kind of realize, okay, that wave was probably that hard because I did so much type thing, then
yes.
let me do a little less the next window.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's learning. It's learning what your
It's learning.
body is going to be able to tolerate. It's learning how damaged your central nervous system is. And
Mhm.
how, as I got further on into the process, I got more motivation, I got more energy. And so the windows started getting more steady for me right around Thanksgiving of last
Mhm.
year. And then once they got more steady and I had more motivation to come back, I started being able to do more and getting out more and doing more. I still had some
Mhm.
waves going on, but I was still able to do more and more and more in those windows. That's how this whole
Yeah.
process goes.
It's
So,
that window and wave dance.
mhm,
And tell me a little bit about how you process your window and your wave. I have so many people say they forget what a
mhm.
window is like when they're in a wave.
Yep.
Did you experience that?
Yes. Yeah, in a window, you sort of forget the wave because you're so
Okay.
relieved, and then
Yeah.
in a wave, you can't believe you ever had a window. It's
Yeah.
that I don't know what that phenomena is. It's like a forgetting,
Yeah.
phenomena, and I always called them, Dr. Jekyll and Mister Hyde days because that's how
Mhm.
different I was on a window day compared to a wave day. I was not the
Okay.
same person on a wave day.
Yeah.
My
I've
whole
heard,
persona would
yeah,
change.
right. I've heard someone referred to it as like state-based memory. I thought that was interesting. Like if you're in a certain state, you remember being in that state other times. And so it could be that our brains just remember, oh, remember all those other waves? Forget the windows. Those are irrelevant.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of I mean, I journal a lot and I remember going
Mhm.
back through my journals, just reading this word hijacking. Um,
Mhm.
I had a hijacking. It's almost like your brain gets hijacked.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it gets hijacked, especially on wave days. You're not able to think a positive thought really on your
Mhm.
own. You have to get that externally and bring
Yes.
that in. And so whether that's from another person or from something you're reading, if you don't have
Mhm.
another person, that's how you bring that in. And so
Mhm.
your brain gets hijacked into these neuro emotions. So you
Yeah.
get sucked into that and you believe that you're never going to get well or that you're never going to have another positive day or did I really have a window? I don't remember. You know?
Right. All of
So
the
it gets
above.
that
Yeah.
hijacking thing going on and you just I mean, I had so many cognitive issues I was trying to remember uh I would forget days at a time during this.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah. I
mhm,
remember I felt like there would be something I would do, and then it was like a clean slate. I was like, "What did I just do a minute
mhm,
ago?" Yeah.
yeah,
I had so
yeah.
many cognitive issues in waves. Yeah.
Yeah, and I call it, I talk to people in this process and I call it brain damage, and it is brain
Mhm.
damage. That's healing.
No. Go ahead.
Your brain is damaged, your central nervous system is damaged, but they're in a state of healing.
Yeah.
But that is literally what this is like. And I remember Andy telling us that in one of our groups, that it's like a person who's been in a car wreck
Yeah.
and they have brain damage, but people like that go through these windows and waves process as well. And so
Mhm.
that's literally what's happening to us, but that doesn't mean that it's not healing
That's right.
at
It
all.
is the pathway to healing.
Right. It's what you have to
Yeah.
go through to get to the other side. And that's
Mhm.
something I tried to remind myself of as well, this is what I have to experience to get to the other side.
That's right.
But I'm getting to the other side no matter what it looks like.
That's right. It was just the process to get there, the messy, painful process of getting to healing.
Yes. And your story
Yeah.
really encouraged me, Joanna, by the way.
Oh.
Your story really, really encouraged me. And I was so excited when you became a coach. I was just like, look at her. Look at her go.
Wow. Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
And that's
So,
why I'm so glad you're joining me.
me too.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's a gift. Yeah, and I remember right away in the groups being like, yeah, this is someone I would really like to connect with. I remember several of the things you said, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to remember that, and I would write it down or repeat it to myself. So, yep,
those
it
were
made a
some
big
of the
difference.
things that I would say in the group were things that I was trying to stick into my head
That's right.
every day. And I'm a big writer. I'm a big journaler. I've journaled
Yeah.
since I was a teenager. And so I'm already used to that. So I would
Mm-hmm.
literally ask myself in the journal, what would you like to hear right now? What are some of the
Mm.
words you would love to hear right now that you can't create?
Mm.
And I would go back to the WhatsApp, the I am app. Sorry, not WhatsApp. And I would literally put that in my journal, like, here's what you need to be thinking right now, or here's what you're unable to think that I'm going to write down. And so I did
Yeah.
that a lot, like every single day I did that because I'm like, oh, I can control this, you know?
That was a big part of your strategy. Yeah.
Yes, that really helped.
And how could you tell when you were healing? What could you see that was different? So many people ask when they're in the middle, they're like, well, is this my new baseline? Am I just like this? Is this what healing feels like when they're like right in the middle and they're not in acute anymore? I've heard that question a lot. So tell us, Elissa, how could you tell when you were healing?
Well, I had a process where I was starting to have a little bit more regular windows at right after a year off.
Mhm.
And then those windows were gone for about 5 months.
Yeah. Wow.
Those were gone. And so I had this really long wave last summer. And then it started to shift in late fall. It was November. It started to
Mhm.
shift, and I started to get these windows where they were literally, I mean, I don't know if they were different windows than they were earlier, but they were windows where I was extremely clear, like crystal clear
Wow.
windows. So, when they say the darkest night comes before the dawn,
Mhm.
that was true in my case. That was true in my journey because I went through a really long wave over the summer. And
Right.
then in the fall, I was like, how long is this wave going to go on? Because I was just convinced that it was just going to end. I just kept trying to convince myself it was going to end. And the crystal clear windows started coming like right around Thanksgiving. And I was like, I don't even remember my windows being this clear before.
Wow.
So the darkest night did come before the dawn. Um,
Wow.
and I think at that point, around Thanksgiving is when I knew. I was like, this is it. This is going to be the end of my journey. I could just feel it. I don't even know how to put that into words.
Wow.
But I mean, I was still having some waves and things, but they were not
You just
anything,
felt you just
anything.
felt the turn. You felt
Mhm.
the turn.
I started
Wow.
sleeping through the night. At that point, my brain started figuring some things out. It started figuring out how to sleep.
Wow.
So I started
Mhm.
sleeping through the night at that point, and then that's when all the symptoms started to shift down during the waves. And then the
Mhm.
windows started coming very frequently at that time. And right around Christmas, they were really frequent. right around Christmas, and I was like,
Just relief.
I made it through the storm, the hardest part of this. I made it through. I made it through with support. I made it through with healing buddies. I made it through with community. My holistic practitioner, I made through with journaling. I made it through with all of these things. No one thing really helped me, but a combination of all these things helped.
Yeah. The combination made a
Yes.
difference.
Mhm.
And one day at a time. And there wasn't like a magic thing you did to get to that other side.
It was
There wasn't
time.
like, it was time.
Time was the magic. Time was the magic. I used to get, irritated at Angie saying that in the groups. Like, you're gonna have to wait. You're gonna have to wait. And I was like, is there any other shortcuts?
Yes. There wasn't.
There's
Yeah.
no other. I mean, there's techniques you can use. There's tools you can, get, like I just talked about. But
Coping strategies. Yeah.
it's gonna take as long as it takes in this. And that was, one of the things I kept trying to tell myself. This healing is gonna take as long as it needs to take. And I'm gonna have to be okay with that.
Yeah. And then it happened. You
Yes.
rounded that bend.
Yes.
Wow. And so, just for people who forget what it feels like to feel good, how does it feel different than when you were in withdrawal, when you were in the worst of the waves? And how does it feel different than being medicated?
You mean compared to withdrawal?
Well, compared to withdrawal, you have less symptoms, right?
Like
How
being
would you
medicated?
describe it?
Yeah. So no, I mean, during the withdrawal was a complete nightmare compared to being on the medications. But I went through periods during the medications where I felt like similar to withdrawal.
Yeah.
I mean, they would stop working and I would have symptoms,
Yeah.
So I think, like we already mentioned before, I think I was in withdrawal many, many times.
Yeah.
But like when the medications would stop, quote unquote, working, I wasn't able to function in my life. I just was not, I was a stay-at-home mom for many years. And then when my son was 9, I went back to school, and it took me 6 years to get my master's degree because I was so ill. So that took a long time for that to happen. I was going through ECT treatments at the time I was in school.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's been a nightmare on and off, but I've had periods of functionality on the meds. So, I praise God for that. That was a blessing that I was able to function for very long stretches of time when I was on the meds. But when they would stop working or the side effects were so much, or I was in withdrawal from them cutting me off the meds and putting me on another med, it just was like it was kind of like a windows and waves process during that time too.
Right.
But being on the meds was very numbing. It was very limiting. I didn't experience joy. I didn't experience true happiness. I didn't experience severe depression when they were working because it puts you in this middle zone.
Yes.
And so the first time that I experienced joy post meds was right around Christmas.
Wow.
And I was thinking, I wonder what that was.
Yeah.
What was that? Was that withdrawal?
Yeah. Yeah,
didn't
because
really
it's
know.
physical, isn't it? It's like in
Was
your
that
body.
happiness? What's going on
Yeah.
here?
Yes.
So it's like being a child again. You have to relearn what emotions are, what normal emotions are, how you normally deal with stress. I mean, I've been on these medicines since I was 24.
Yeah.
So I don't remember when I was 23 years old how I dealt with life emotionally. So it's a new process for me, being 54 years old and trying to figure out how to navigate life normally. It really
With
is.
feelings.
Yeah, with normal reactions to things, and I experienced joy for the first time right around Christmas when we saw a Christmas play, and I thought my first thought was, "Oh, no, that was mania," which was like, "Oh, wait, no, I'm not manic anymore." And then my second thought was, "That's withdrawal." And then I had to like, "Wait a minute, maybe that's not withdrawal anymore." And then my third thought was, "That was literal, actual joy."
Wow. So you had to learn how to
So,
understand what it even was, what it felt like to just
yeah, I mean,
have
you
joy.
look at it through first you look at it through the lens of bipolar, then you look at it through the
Mhm.
lens of withdrawal, then you look at it through the lens of I'm healed.
Yes.
So it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I'm feeling emotions now. I mean, they're raw and they're beautiful.
Mm.
And like I have never felt emotions that I can remember. So
That's
it's a
amazing.
miraculous life that I live now. And even though I have a couple of days a week where it's a little bit more wavy, and
Mhm.
I can feel it in my body that it's still kind of a wave. But the
Mhm.
window days are like, I mean, I can't even describe it in words. It's like miraculous the way that I experience life now. And so that's why I
Mhm.
want to give people in this community hope that
Mhm.
for 28 years I was numbed by these meds and a very
Mhm.
limited way of experiencing life and of seeing
Mhm.
colors and
Yeah.
of having a relationship, a very limited way of having a relationship with, with anybody, my husband, anybody. So now it's totally, totally different. It's more clear. It's
Wow.
more joy. It's
Wow.
more, it can be more sadness, but it's real sadness. It's not depression or medication induced
Yeah.
sadness.
Mhm.
And so it's a discovery and it's absolutely beautiful. It's
Right,
beautiful.
because it's live consciousness. It's like because of your experience of life, of being alive, comes with emotion
Yeah, it's
and
like
response.
it's living in the moment.
Mhm.
And when things happen to you, you're like, oh, okay. And you can process through that. And
Mhm.
I can't say that I ever did that in a successful way on the meds.
Right.
I
Because there was
really can't.
all this other stuff going on, that was from medication, changing and interrupting. Yeah.
Yes. And numbing and just being offline. I mean, I had so much apathy on the
Mhm.
meds and like this anhedonic type of
Mhm.
feeling that my son would have lots of milestones in his life and I would be like, huh, okay, that's just kind of how it
Yeah.
was. I was like, everybody else is kind of getting excited about it, but maybe that's my personality. Maybe I just don't get excited about things. That's how I
Yeah.
felt on them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Just like
It's like,
real actual life wasn't breaking through in the
no,
same.
no.
Yeah.
No, it's like, the sun breaking through the clouds, but the sun doesn't completely reach the ground. That's kind of how
Yeah.
it feels.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. How do you see that now looking back? How do you like I've heard so many people say I've wasted all these years on the meds. I've heard this before. What is your perspective of that for yourself?
No, I mean, time is never wasted.
Right.
God created us to be on this planet, and whatever we need to go through, we're just going to have to go through it. That's the way I have looked at life.
Mm.
Um, I believe that suffering is not for zero reason.
Mm.
We have to experience the suffering to know what true joy is. We have comparisons in this life. And so to reach the true joy in life or the happiness or the heartache or anything, we have to know the opposite. So I
Mm.
just have always looked at, God's plan for me as on purpose, on purpose.
Mm.
And even though I had to take the meds and I suffered on and off, not the whole time, I suffered on and off for 28 years, it brought me right here, right now.
Mm.
And that's a blessing. You know, that's the way I choose to look at it. You know, God has blessed me in this life no matter what.
Mm.
That's how I choose to look at it. That's how I've always chosen to look at it. And,
Right.
you know, my suffering has brought me learning. And to me,
Yeah.
curiosity to get to the other side of these meds and to get to the other side of withdrawal has kept me going. I want to know what it's like to be off these things. I want to
Yeah.
know what it's like to get past withdrawal. And that curiosity kept me going and it got me right here.
I love that. And I'm glad you're here.
Me too.
And I'm excited for the journey ahead.
Yes, me too.
Yes. So, you have to follow Elissa. She's going to have a channel. She's going to be
Yes.
sharing more encouragement with you. And as you can tell from our video today, she has a lot of good things to share. And we're going to be working together. She's going to have a calendar with Life After Meds. And we also are running groups together. One for those of you tapering, one for those of you who are off your meds but still suffering symptoms. We are just so glad to be able to offer our stories of help and hope and healing, because healing is there for every one of you. And we're glad to be able to meet with you and to listen to your stories and walk with you in your healing. Do you have any other thoughts to add, Elissa?
I just, you know, I feel for everybody in this community. I know that everybody is suffering in this community with something, you know, whatever med you came off of, but there is healing. There absolutely is healing in this. And it's been a really long journey for me, and I made it to the other side.
That's
So
right.
we're here together to support each other and give everybody else hope in this, that you can make it. You can do
You
this.
can make it. That's
Yes.
right. There is another side to this. This suffering is not all that exists for you in this life. There is another side to this. And Elissa's story is such a great example of that. Elissa, thank you so much. And I'm just so thankful to be part of your story and so thankful to be able to have met you in Angie's group.
Yes. Well, I'm thankful for you and all you've done for this community too. And all you've done for me.
Yay. Together.
Yes.
All right. Well, awesome. All right, everybody, follow the links in the video description to learn more about Elissa and her channel. And we look forward to seeing you in our meetings and groups. All right.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.